I greet you standing on the land of the Kalinago people, the first peoples of Cameron Island. This island and its peoples existed long before Columbus sighted it, and ages before the Europeans invaded and plundered this island in the name of European exploration and resource extraction. Plunder, extraction, and genocide, which financed and fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and specifically to build the British Empire. So today, I honor the memory and legacy of the first inhabitants, the Kalinagos we will never forget. For they were among the first of many casualties of European dehumanization, enslavement, and plunder in the Caribbean region. And as we gather here on the land of the Kalinago people, I stand proudly on the shoulders of our African ancestors, the children, women, and men who were forcibly removed from their tribes, their homes, their villages, their countries, their continent, crowded onto ships like cargo, and forced to endure the treacherous, inhumane, and deadly trip across the Atlantic Ocean. A death trap, if you wish. A death trap of disease, death, and despair. For 400 years, human beings were insured as property. Trading human beings for profit was one of the most lucrative trades of that time. The lucrative trade, colleagues, was nothing less than human trafficking, a crime against humanity. We are here today because millions of our African ancestors survived this perilous journey. However, we must never forget the many Africans, our ancestors, that succumbed to the harshness and brutality of human chattel enslavement. Chattel enslavement, of course, being the worst form of human enslavement. And I would be remiss if I did not remember our ancestors who, in an act of defiance, fought back or chose death over subjugation and enslavement by making the floors of the Atlantic Ocean their burial ground. Today is a day of remembrance, a day to remember our ancestors and their descendants. And it is finally a day of recognition of the harms of slavery and a moment of global reckoning, a moment of reckoning that is long overdue. So if you remember anything about today, I hope you remember these 3 points. 1, this apology and financial commitment from Laura Trevelyan and the family should serve as a clarion call to other families, institutions, and governments in Europe to acknowledge their wrongs, apologize, and commit to repairing the harms done by the ancestors. Secondly, governments in the Caribbean region must do more for the struggle for reparative justice and come together using, of course, the CARICOM Reparations Commission as the vehicle through which the battle for reparatory justice is waged and must be won. Further, our governments must consistently and publicly, with one voice, call on European nations to engage in a conversation with their counterparts in the Caribbean region. The result of these conversations must be the creation of a comprehensive social and economic development plan that creates a stronger, sustainable, and thriving Grenada and the Caribbean region. Thirdly, this fight for reparatory justice is our fight. the topic of slavery and reparations should and must be part of our school's curriculum, from primary school through university, because it is only through education rooted in truth about our past, our present, and our future that we will truly liberate ourselves from the lies and falsehoods that we have been taught. This movement for reparatory justice must utilize our education system as a place to achieve true liberation. I call it education for liberation. Colleagues, this is the beginning of a process, or a part of a process, that is undergirded by truth, transparency, and repair. The truth of the matter is that for 400 years, Europeans, including the Trevelyan family, benefited from the inhumane and illegal trafficking of human beings for profit and generational wealth building. Furthermore, as we embark on this important journey together, we must commit to being transparent with each other about our shared vision for justice for our first peoples and our African ancestors. Descendants of enslavers and profiteers of slavery must clearly and fully understand the social, economic, and devastating public health impacts that hundreds of years of economic disinvestment and social neglect have had on individuals and families as well as our nation. And they must address the current social and economic realities of the lingering legacy of concentrated disadvantage manifested as poor quality education, illiteracy, high rates of unemployment, poor health outcomes, and overall stalled national development and nation building. And I do acknowledge the concern of those of you brothers and sisters in our midst who are wondering whether there will ever be a level of financial compensation that can repair what was stolen and lost because of the indigenous genocide, the slave trade, and slavery. And maybe not. Maybe there can never be no financial compensation by families, governments, and institutions that have benefited from slavery. However, we say to the families, to the institutions, to the governments, that they must contribute to stop the bleeding of the many wounds caused by indigenous genocide, the slave trade, and slavery. As one people, as one family, we must come together to have honest and principled conversations in our homes, in our churches, our schools, on the football fields, wherever we are. We must gather to talk with each other about what repairing the harms of slavery means for us, for our families, and for the broader Caribbean society. This is a conversation that we must have. As a matter of fact, we, the Grenadian people, must decide what repair should look like, and the engagement continues. The Trevelyan family is setting an example by saying they are sorry for the harms that their family caused to our families. They are opening a door, which we appreciate. We do not expect the Trevelyan family to pay for all the debts of all the British families, for the royal family, for the British government. But we appreciate that the hand that they have now stretched forth to say, listen, my ancestors have sinned, and I am prepared to stretch a hand to help. To the government of Grenada, we have all of them. The cabinet meeting is now at the Trade Center Annex. We say achieving reparatory justice must become a core and central development strategy for this nation. Reparations cannot be seen as a side project We must invest in and commit to the plans and processes needed to get us on a solid path towards securing what is owed to our ancestors and their descendants. To each and every Grenadian here in Grenada and in the diaspora, we say the legacy of slavery is alive and well, and that this is not a lost cause. This is not something that we should put behind and move on. We must join hearts and hands and, as a strong, proud, and resilient people, demand justice, fight for fairness, and hold those responsible for the plunder, extraction, and exploitation of our nation, and for the inhumane treatment of our ancestors. We must hold them accountable. Hold them accountable for the harms they have done and for the persistent problems that our people, that our nation, have been subjected to. As we continue to embark on this journey for reparative justice, we must not forget that there is a glaring need to reset the soul of the nation, of our nation. A soul that remains scarred by the history of colonialism. It is for this reason that the Grenada National Reparations Committee continues to lobby our government to transform the monumental landscape of our country by renaming our streets, our schools, and other national institutions, renaming them after outstanding Grenadians or even outstanding Caribbean nationals that have contributed significantly to our civilization. No one needs to remind us that almost 50 years of independence, we still see the Royal Grenada Police Force and His Majesty's prison. So, Prime Minister, members of Cabinet, we must also engage in a national conversation on the issue of republicanism. A conversation on Grenada becoming a republic and moving away graciously from the English monarchy as head of state must commence in earnest. As Grenadians, we are very aware that on 2 occasions we went to the polls to vote yea or nay for the Caribbean Court of Justice to be our final appellate court. On both occasions, we said nay. This issue of the Caribbean Court of Justice is worth revisiting, for it is not merely a legal issue. It is an issue that goes fundamentally to the ideals of an independent nation, growing, maturing, and defining itself. It forms part of the definition of who we are as a people. It is these issues that will nourish the very ethos of Grenadianism. Colleagues, friends, family, comrades, as I have said before, today is a continuation of a long struggle for justice for our indigenous and African ancestors. And we commit to working hand in hand, governments and individuals, fisher folks, farmers, students, teachers, Rastafarians, public servants, all. Let us never forget, we may not all be perfect, but we are all sacred. It is in remembering the sacredness of our ancestors and descendants as human beings, created in the own image and likeness of God, superior to no one, and certainly not inferior to anyone, worthy of dignity and respect, that we will fight until justice is served. We shall, on this issue of reparative justice, we shall move forward on our feet and not on our knees. the struggle continues. Thank you.